best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy New Year. This is the last edition of Debate Friday for the year 2022. In this edition of Debate, Friday Night Debate, we're going to be looking at a big question. Is Liberia headed in the right direction, or where is Liberia headed? Is Liberia on the right trajectory? And we're going to look at some indicators to answer that question. The things we're going to look at will be in the area of democracy, in the area of governance and development. Where is Liberia headed? And we're going to have a scorecard here to help us tell or gauge where we are as a people. Joining me for this is my co-host tonight, Mrs. Welle Wilson Momba. Welle, welcome to Friday Night Debate.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. I also want to welcome Madam Glendy Jane Jr. of G Talk. Glendy, welcome to the show. This Friday Night Debate.
Thank you, Dennis. It's good to be here. Hello, everybody.
And this is the last Friday of the year. We are so excited.
Yes.
I want to welcome Mr. Momba Kesali. He's the Youth Wing Secretary of the Alternative National Congress. Mr. Kesali, welcome to Friday Night Debate.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It is a pleasure being on your show this evening. I'd like to say good afternoon, good evening to all of the followers of the Focus on Liberia platform. It's good to be here, and happy holidays, everyone.
We are so glad to have you, Mr. Kesali, and Mr. Kesali support Mr. Cummings. I want to also welcome a supporter of President Weah, that's the unapologetic and unabashed seditious Mr. Jerome Gaiman. Mr. Gaiman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to represent the greatest president Liberia ever has since 1822. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the debate.
Last and definitely not the least is a supporter of Councillor Tiawanse Gonglo, Mr. Ambula Mame. Mr. Mame, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. It's good to be here, and compliments of the season to the rest of the panelists and people listening to us via the internet.
Happy return. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. Again, this is Friday Night Debate. Here, Friday night, we discuss issues, and we have those representing the various political parties or presidential hopefuls. Mr. Weah, Councillor Gonglo, and Mr. Cummings. We have independent Glendy G Talk Juniors, and my co-host tonight is Mrs. Alice Morba. All right, let's start. So in order for us to gauge how we are doing, where the country is as we end the year, we've gone 12 months. We want to see where we are. I have something here for us to discuss based on these three areas. Number one, we have democracy. Under democracy, we have elections. And the question we're going to be addressing, are the elections regular? Are they free, fair, and transparent? Throughout 2022, we have elections, and we want to talk about elections being free, being regular. Every time we want to have elections, are we having elections? Are they free? Are they fair? And are they transparent? Under democracy, we also talk about freedom. And freedom, we want to look at protests. Are protests allowed, or are there hurdles in the way when you want to have protests? Are people allowed to associate, to assemble? Are newspapers and news organs free to report whatever they want to report? Is there equal access to state-run media? These are the things we're going to look at under freedom. And then the separation of powers. Is there any interference in the justice and legislative function by the executive? Or do we have three separate and co-equal branches of government working independently. Those are the things we want to look at as we gauge the level of democracy in our country. Next, we're going to go to governance. That's the second category. Under governance, we're going to talk about leadership. In our city leadership, the county's leadership, cabinet, are they functioning independently and are they responsive to the needs of the people? This is what we want to grade the government on. Then our integrated institutions. Let's talk about the LACC, the GACC, and the PP or PPCC. I always get that name wrong. Are they working? Is there respect for this institution? Are they allowed to function and are they functioning independently? Under governance, again, we're going to look at security. And security, we want to look at food security, economic security, being safe from criminal acts, sexual and gender-based violence, and so on. The third level we're going to mention tonight is development. And when we talk of development, we want to talk about infrastructure, health and sanitation, energy and telecommunication. Under infrastructure, we want to look at roads, bridges, and public buildings such as schools, city halls, parks, libraries, construction, and maintenance of those areas. Under health, we want to look at clean environment, medical facilities, staff, and functional. And under energy, telecom, and all that, we want to look at electricity, phone, and internet connectivity. Those are the things I want us to look at tonight. Let me go around the room 1 minute, starting with my co-host. Your general feeling about things in Liberia and what we are going to discuss tonight based on what I proposed. What your take?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Generally, things in Liberia, some of them are on course and some are not on course. And as we go through the discussion, we're going to be putting one by one according to what we have on schedule. So for now, it's a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Glendy, your intro.
So when I saw the topic, it was very interesting because I think it's very broad. It's kind of difficult to really say, but it's good to be here. It's good to discuss all of these things so that we all have a say so in where we feel the government is heading or where they are.
Mr. Gibbon.
Thank you very much for the topic. I think they are germane and appropriate for the season. This is the last day, last debate of the year. I think those topics you have touched, they are actually germane and related to what we are doing, and I think it is on point.
Mr. Mame, if you're not talking, please mute your phone because I'm getting feedback, or mute your line. Mr. Mame?
Yeah, same thing. Interesting topics. It is my expectation that we will discuss the issues in the prism of the commitment the president made in 2018 through his pro agenda, the agenda for development up to 2023. Those promises that were made, specific indicators that were expected to have been met. Where are we now with those indicators? So it will be my expectation that we'll discuss it in that context, rather than making broad and unsubstantiated sentimental opinions, on the state of affairs. So I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion. Just start posing the progress we've made towards the promises that were delivered.
Thank you, Mr. Keverly. First time on Friday night debate. We are glad to have you.
Thank you very much. I don't know why you didn't invite me ever since, but you explain later. Anyway, I want to say thanks. I see that the topics you outlined clearly encapsulates where we are as a country and people. I don't think there are any other aspects in terms of our governance or even our very existence as a country that are more important than the things you listed. Uh, I believe all the panelists and also our followers should be given the opportunity to share their thoughts on everything that's happening because we cannot try to stifle the opinions of others, regardless of where we sit. I know Jerome is here from the CDC. We hope he'll be relaxed as we'll be critical of his government because Liberia is our common patrimony and we love Liberia than any other person. So we will not be easy. Where we need to be tough, we'll be tough. Where we need to be slow, we'll be slow. But at the end of the day, we want Liberia to get better. So it's a privilege to be here to, form an opinion about the issues you raised. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start on democracy. And at this time, we'll go to Mr. Gilman. Next will be Mr. Mame, and then Mr. Kesseley before we go to Glendy. Mr. Gilman, first of all, is Liberia headed where is Liberia headed? And the first place we want to drill down is on democracy. Your take.
Well, from the time we came to power, 2018, to now, there is no dispute. We may argue, but based on the facts, Liberia is headed in the right direction. We talk about democracy, we talk about the right to participate in the democratic process. Are elections free? Can anybody register or attempt to be a participant in the democracy? The answer is yes. Have anybody been denied? Have anybody been intimidated? Those things are all in the negative. We can now say from Vanjima, Ilofa, the farther north of the country, to the farther south in Buchanan, women, young men and women are taking part into this process. So we are saying, from what we are seeing here, our democracy is in good hands and the trajectory is actually encouraging, and I'm well pleased.
Thank you. Mr. Mame, on democracy, where are we headed?
So, President, we are inherited a relatively functioning democracy, a relatively enlightened group of people willing to participate. So the structure that he made, was quite strong enough that he could not alter. The support from international partners, Liberians' commitment to changing or electing their leaders through the ballot box, that choice that our people made since 2005, 2011, and through different by-elections have been very strong, that no leader, can easily alter, even if there are attempts, to alter it. So relative to democracy, we are strong, even though our democracy is threatened. Time interval is being threatened by different instances, but we are very optimistic. We are very sure that the strong fabrics of democracy that President Weah met, he has not been able to alter them. We listened to attempts in the past by people close to the president making statements indicating of his desire to undermine democracy. There's a popular public saying of Samuel Tue, the finance minister, that the Liberians need a benevolent dictator, and that's the reason why he called on Liberians to vote for Thomas Fowler during the senatorial election. So President Weah can have, in his word, absolute power to make absolute decisions. And because the only way Liberia can move forward at the pace that he anticipates is that when we have a benevolent dictator. So when we listen to that, we know that there are attempts threatening the democracy. Those are comments that threaten our democracy. But the strength of our people, the resolve of our people, that statement contributed to the defeat of Thomas Fowler, because our people sounded the warning that they are not interested in any form of democracy. Whether you can describe it as benevolent democracy, you can describe it as heaven-related democracy, a dictatorship rather. They were committed to the democracy of one man, one vote. So yes, the democracy is strong, but it's strong because of the people. It's strong because of the foundation that was met. We know that there were attempts by people to undermine this democracy and make it fragile, to install a benevolent dictator in their wards. But the commitment of our people have been resolved, and we're looking forward to seeing how all the delays around the National Elections Commission conducting the different processes leading to the election will not serve as additional reason for us think and feel that the democracy is being threatened. So we're looking forward to that, especially from the National Elections Commission. Until that can be done, our hope, our reliance, our faith in our democracy is basically based in the structure that President Weah made, in the commitment and resolve of our people to change and elect their leaders through the ballot box. And all the attempts, including threats of having a benevolent dictator, including messages of having a benevolent dictator as the best option to push our country forward, have been defeated.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Kessley. Mr. Kessley, again, the same question on democracy. And when we talk about our democracy, we're looking at elections, we're looking at freedom, and we're looking at the separation of powers. Go ahead, sir.
So let me start with elections. Then we all know very well that our democracy is under threat by President Weah and his handlers. They have shown time and again their unwillingness to live within the confines of the laws. They have taken deliberate actions in every electioneering period to undermine the strength and competence of the National Elections Commission. The Ministry of Finance, through the Minister of Finance, Samuel Twe, on many occasions continuously and deliberately delays payments to the National Elections Commission, which often pushes the NEC to delay on delivering on her timetables when we go into elections. So often the NEC is lagging behind on her schedules, and people who should be implementing structures and processes never really truly have the ample time and the needed resources to deliver competently. So on that note, firstly, talking about elections, I can say our democracy is going down the drain, and we have to. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and we have to put our foot down to make sure that Mr. Weah doesn't do what the CDC is planning to do. Additionally, Dennis, the international community oftentimes has to come up with warnings against Mr. Weah and the government and reminding them of our troubled past before most times they can relieve some pressure from on her opponents. There's not complete freedom of movement, association in the opposition community. People are being harassed, people are being intimidated, people are being threatened every day because they disagree with President Weah. People cannot live freely and openly in Liberia because they are in the opposition community. Those are clear indicators that our democracy is heavily challenged and is not progressing. So you talk about involvement with other state structures. Clearly, President Weah controls the other two branches of the Liberian government. President Weah controls the legislature. President Weah controls the judiciary. He has his handlers sitting as far as on the Supreme Court bench, up to and including the Chief Justice of the Republic of Liberia. So our current president has the ability to be able to sway the opinion of the highest court in the land because it is covered and shrouded by his loyalists and his supporters who would do whatever he wishes them to do. The legislature is worse. We know the speaker does not question anything President Weah does. So how can we sit here on this platform and even phantom the thought or the idea that our democracy is doing pretty well? Our state institutions are being deliberately weakened, and I want to disagree with Ambula on that point. I mean, they made strong institutions, but they deliberately weakened those institutions. The government weakened the LACC, for example. The government weakened the GAC, for example. The government continuously weakens the National Election Commission. So, I mean, our democracy is under threat. We need to put our foot down and make sure we halt some of the many excesses of the CDC-led government.
Thank you. Let me go to Glendy.
So I think a little bit of everything what everyone have said, but I will describe the democracy in Liberia as being strangulated. And when I say strangulated, what I mean is there are so many things that's holding the democracy down. If it's not for the people and their resilience, it would be totally strangled. When you look at you asking for democracy, you're asking for education. There are some of the school buildings, they are so deplorable. There are tuition that is so high that the government have not been able to even regulate tuition for private school. Parents are not able to afford tuition. The pay that people get, the monthly allowances that they get, $40 or $25 or $30. How can you look at that and think that we're moving in the right direction? Poverty remains or is even at the highest based on different reports. You talk about freedom. How is a country free when every week or every other week we hear about some mysterious death? The country is seriously strangled. Then we're looking at separation of power. We cannot have a separation of power in a government when the government is in control of all three branches of the country. When you look at elections, some people boast of free and fair elections in Liberia. I doubt it seriously. Even going back to some of the elections we've had, people had to be able to be there to speak out against it. And it also, if President Weah or if the government is not in favor of whoever is running, then it's even difficult for that person to run. So when you want a one-word description of the government of Liberia on democracy, I'll say we're in a state of strangulation for our government, trying to wiggle our head to see whether we're going left or right. So it's pretty difficult to really describe what it is. And if you're looking for a score, it's kind of even difficult to put a number to what our democracy is currently.
Thank you. Alice, any question or comment? Or you're muted.
Come to Mob. Start from Mob. You talk about in the democracy, people being harassed and intimidated. Is there any specific before you give me your score?
Okay, yes. Recently, for example, when the ANC through and the CPP announced the hosting of the Retire Suffering Rally, we all saw that the Secretary General of the CDC and the Mayor of the City of Monrovia threatened people that were, planning to attend that rally that, in fact, people should not attend the rally, and they said a lot of things. Aside from that, see what the Ministry of Youth and Sport did. They tried to stop the rally from holding because they felt within themselves that it was not in support of the government. Even though the ANC had paid monies to the government for the usage of the SKD facility, it took us weeks of back and forth and fighting, and then the involvement of our international partners before the government could finally give us a green light to go ahead with the rally. They did everything they could to undermine the holding of that rally. There is not a day where people have gathered peacefully without the government harassing, intimidating, and in fact hurting them. So let's look at the July 26 incidents that happened between the CDC COP and students of the University of Liberia through the Student Unification Party. The government sponsored talks and hooligans to attack peaceful students who disagree with President Weah. They almost maimed and killed one of the protesters. So I mean, those are just three very clear instances of intimidation, harassment, and in fact physical assault and abuse by the government, which threatens our democracy. So if you want me to give a percentage now, I will give a percentage. The government actually scored 25%.
That's an F.
F, yes.
Mommy, you want to come in and give us a number or letter?
Yeah, I will say the government school C. In democracy, I wouldn't say F. But I know the components of democracy include the people. And that's the reason why I reference how Liberians have stood up. Liberians have challenged the system. I know there were attempts to undermine democracy and install dictatorship through using flimsy voice or attractive voice, but Liberians stood up against it. But looking at government buying down, like international partners getting involved, like in the case of the CPP protest, and government accepting, the government had the option to say no, we wouldn't do it, but they allow it because they succumb to pressure. Real mainstream dictators do not easily succumb to pressure. And I don't see President Weah and his government as a mainstream dictatorship. I see them as people attempting to practice and learn how to be dictators. I see them adapting some of the attributes and characteristics of dictatorship. I see the signs and symptoms of dictatorship around them that they try to install, but the people have been resilient, the people have been strong with their commitment to democracy. So that's why I don't give them F, I give them C, because they have option in some of the cases to just already reject, but they succumb. The fact that they are succumbing to the will of the people rather than their own will is an indication that they can be nurtured into better democracy than the signs and symptoms of dictatorship that we've been seeing over time. So I gave them C.
You want to comment on the separation of powers or influences from one to the other?
For separation of power, like I said, most time the legislature is mostly a caravan of thieves. They make decisions based on how much they are paid, on what their interest is. But a classic example of what makes the legislature to be a caravan of thieves. The legislature, and Dennis, we ran over this for almost a year. The legislature enacted a law in 2019, amended the petroleum law in 2019. That law says every petroleum agreement in Liberia signed by the government must allot 5% equity share, a mandatory 5% equity share for what the law referred to as citizen fund, which was basically a sovereign wealth fund that every Liberian, regardless of who you are and which political party you come from, will benefit from that sovereign wealth fund. The legislature amended that law in 2019, and they did that secretly and shifted the 5% from citizen fund to 5% for Liberian businesses, and selected 7 Liberian businesses and awarded the 5% to them while they are awaiting petroleum agreement to be signed. It took 2 years of consistent advocacy, including your show and other people, to get them to reverse that law later on in 2020, in 2021. So, I mean, people who are elected, and they only did that because somebody called them to do it. So I don't want to talk much about the legislature. I want to focus more on the executive today. We can find time to talk about them, but in summary, the legislature is mostly a caravan of thieves.
Alex, back to you.
Glendy.
So
I know, I know you feel so frustrated and don't even want to say anything about what good they are doing in democracy. But I want to hear from you. Just give us some letter, whether F or B or C minus. Let's talk about that.
So in all fairness, I think because we've had a lot of people and other governments and other leaders helping to monitor the situation in Liberia, and also we've had a portion of Liberians that continue to speak out and expose the ills in the Liberian society, I wouldn't give them a failing grade. I'll probably do a C minus, because I think to some degree there is some democracy in Liberia because we are being watched, and because every time there's something bad that happens, give or take, President Weah does do a knee-jerk movement where he tries to come back, counteract, and then change strategies and all of those things. But I think when you put everybody together, the citizens in Liberia, along with the citizens that's in the diaspora that continues to monitor the situation in our country, I think a C minus will be good on democracy in our country. But we can certainly do a whole lot better.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilman.
Mr. Mande and I usually don't agree on anything, and he can tell you that. But I will agree with him because one of the things that I respect about him is that he sets precedents and sometimes most of the time attach numbers to it. When we are talking about democracy, yes, what the Unity Party started They came in, as much as we may disagree with Ellen, they came in at a zero and they brought it to a level where others can take over. One of the things I don't want us to overlook is one of my countrymen, Councillor Bronskin, said it. He said, even with the presence of 15,000 UN people here, if the Liberian people did not want peace, they would have made life difficult for those 15,000 folks. So the power of democracy, like Mr. Melvin is saying, is actually the people of Liberia who have resolved to say no matter what, democracy is going to thrive here. And our women, our youth, in the absence of international pressure, Liberians themselves have resolved that this democracy is going to stand. So I do not want to give the international community that much pressure because they are not there. Those who are on the ground, those who were there for the war, you experience war and the mayhem thereof. So for the Liberians to say, amidst it all, we are going to do what is right, to see women, to see men, young men, subscribing to that concept, I think it's great. And when we talk about the government, like we talk about the CPP, what they did over there, the youth ministry, was actually the right thing to do. It was a blunder that the head was not communicating with the middle, and the decisions were wrong. But in the interest of peace, yes, it was the right thing to do. If a contract is signed, which is a social contract, that one body pays and another body acquiesces, it makes sense to give the benefit of doubt to those who have paid their money to have the protest. So yes, that is also sign of democracy. We saw elections where 2020, where the ruling party lost every seat to the opposition, and nothing happened. That's democracy. So what I'm saying here is we should not give the international community that much of a credit. We should give credit where it belongs, and that's to the Liberian people. Based on that, I say there's a lot of work to be done, a lot more to be done. I would give this administration a C plus. That's about 75. That's it. And this is my government. There's a lot of work to be done. I like where we are headed to. It is not a dictatorship. People can make a decision. 2020, when we lost every seat in the country, most people thought that the president would have intervened or the army would have intervened. Our opposition, in our own stronghold, swept the entire district, the entire county. Nobody did anything to circumvent that, including everywhere in the country. So that is the trajectory that we want our democracy to go. We all need to nurture that and make sure that it is sustainable.
Thank you, Mr. Gilman. That leads us to our next pillar or our next category, which is governance. So when we talk about governance, we talk about leadership, especially on the part of the executive, our city mayors, our superintendent, being responsive to the needs of the people, working independently, working, upholding the Constitution that they pledge to uphold and support. We talk about governance. We also talk about the integrity institution, because we can't do this alone by our own free will or good hearts. It must take institutions like the LACC, like the GAC, to keep things in check and make sure that we have everybody get a fair shake. And also, the government role is to provide security. We should be, have economic security, food security, and we should be safe from criminal behavior. So on this side of governance, let me start with Mr. Kessley this time and say, how are we doing?
I mean, you were coming broken in there, so I really didn't get most of the questions, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. It's on. This time now we are on governance.
Okay.
And based on our scorecard, we say when we talk about governance, we are talking about leadership on the city and county level, functioning independently and being responsible. We're talking about our institutions that help keep everybody in check and also being secure, both food, economic, and also safe from criminals.
Okay, so let me start from the counties. So first of all, the leadership at county level is not working. And it's very bad because there's a huge disconnect between national government and the local governance structures in the 15 political subdivisions of the country. So I'll give you a few examples. So take Grangida, for example. The superintendent of Grangida County literally runs his own government or a parallel government to the government in Monrovia. So the superintendent unilaterally attacks people, unilaterally harasses citizens in Grangida County, and not much is done from Central Monrovia to arrest his excesses. That's one. So we go to Lofa County, for example, where this county structure in Lofa County during the June election, senatorial by-election, were threatening residents of Lofa County. They were threatening chiefs that if they don't support the CDC leader or the CDC candidate in the election, they will remove them from payroll. They went as far as bringing in police officers to harass opponents. And most of those things were done without the acquiescence or approval of the central government in the space. So they were again running a parallel government. So county structures wise, and by the way, this is not unique to Grangida and Lofa County. It happens everywhere, wherein county superintendents and county leadership do as they will and please. Often, when it comes to the attention of national government through public outcry, that's when they call the superintendent or whoever it is to Monrovia and try to warn them or whatsoever. So there's a huge void or disconnect between the county structures and the national government structure. And then let's look at the national government. The president, again, this falls on his lap, has shown gross incompetence and lack of responsibility with handling the leadership of the country. The president leaves the country, for example, in 2022, the president left the country for 48 days. That is the highest number of days on record or in living memory in these contemporary times where our president left the country and went on a foreign visit. After all, what was Mr. Weah doing? Mr. Weah was in Qatar watching football games. And what was happening back home? People were struggling. People could not afford to feed themselves. Rice price was going up. The economy was tough. That is a clear display of lack of leadership. That is a clear testament to the fact that Mr. Weah is not performing the duties for which he took an oath at the Samarkand Sports Complex on January 18th in Monrovia. And then let's look at you're talking about food security. Obviously, for 5 years, Mr. Weah has been promising that we invest in agriculture, we'll try to feed our people. Today, this government cannot tell you a single place where they produce a bag of rice through the government of Liberia initiative to feed 2, 3 people. And how many dollars have we invested in agriculture? Tens of millions of dollars. We've invested in overhead, in everything, but nothing we have achieved, nothing we have accumulated. Agriculture has not moved a single inch. If anything, the structures they met on the ground when they took over from Madame Salif have been destroyed, and the next government will have to start from something totally new. So, I mean, talking about anti-graft institutions, I raised that earlier. There is a deliberate and working coordination by people in the executive to ensure that state anti-corruption institutions do not perform according to their statutory responsibilities. The General Auditing Commission, for example, that commission's work is not to give praises to the president or to government officials or to be seen as working with them or for them. No, they work for the people of Liberia. Therefore, they should hold whoever it is at whatever level accountable for state resources that have been given to their care. But the General Auditing Commission is lame dog. They're not working. They're not performing. The LSCC, we saw the government appoint a Nigerian, Waboduki, to the as head of LSCC. Kanu Bagbara sits at the LSCC, a very corrupt young man. What is happening to him? He is working scot-free. There is allegations of corruption against the very people who should be fighting corruption. And what has Mr. Weah done? Absolutely nothing. Those people are still working free. Take, for example, Nathaniel Fallow McGill, Serena Cephas, and Bill Twelve. They were disgraced by our most important international partner, the United States of America. What did Mr. Weah do? He announced that, oh, we will investigate the allegations that have been levied against these three individuals and will bring them to court, or will make sure that they are given a day in court. Since he made those announcements, nothing happened. The guys resigned from their various positions. As we speak today, the government is surreptitiously supporting Nathaniel McGill to go and serve as senator for Magidi County. So, Dennis, I mean, again, the government performed very poorly, and I'm going to give them another F. Thank you.
Wendy?
So I don't have much to say about that, but I'm going to say it in a short sentence. No leadership, poor accountability, poor governance. So I will also give the government an F.
Mr. Mame?
Governance. I think the president has outsourced his governance responsibility to people in government.
True.
And is more of like a lame dog president, relaxed and enjoying himself. There are countless indicators to point to, things that should worry, things that should concern and trickle a president, because governance is about making decisions,
Yes.
guiding processes, ensuring check and balance, making sure progress are made, and if progress are not made, correcting those mistakes. But President Weah sits and takes no action when grave things happen. He has to be pushed. He has to be lambasted. He has to be embarrassed before he can take action. Even if he does, most of the actions are cosmetic. Criminals are in possession of our diplomatic passports, embarrassing the country and its reputation. It does not only affect the president now, it affects some of us and several other Liberians who travel across with Liberian passports. The president launched an investigation. Criminals indicted, arrested by the U.S. government, holding Liberia diplomatic passport. The president announced an investigation with more than 1 year now. We cannot know who are those on the investigative panel and what the outcome of those investigations for criminals holding our diplomatic passport. That lack of governance. People indicted. I don't want to go over what other people have said, but it's important to highlight the critical role that the international community led by the U.S. played to transform Liberia. They indict officials of government and sanction them for corruption. The president announced prosecution. Up to date, you cannot see any semblance of his wanting to prosecute. But few years, 1 year back, the director of passport, because he's a middle level, junior level staff, was indicted by the same U.S. government. Immediately the next day, he was indicted by the grand jury of Liberia for corruption. He had to escape Liberia. Right after he was sanctioned, the next day, less than 24 hours, he was indicted by the Liberian government. He had to escape. We've gone more than 6 months since McGill and other people were indicted by the U.S. government. The government of Liberia has not taken action. Several things. The governance in the country is at its all-time low. There is a complete disconnect between what's happening in Monrovia and what's happening in other parts of the country. People are running pseudo regimes in other counties. Certain mayor in Bapolu is more powerful than the superintendent. How he gets money to carry on development program, the leadership of the county is not aware. The certain mayor receives funds from where nobody knows, but it's being implemented in the name of the county. He constructing roads, he putting up solar lights, he painting facilities. But the superintendent of the county is not aware where the resources are coming from. They are not passing through the structure of government.
No.
All the different county leadership, the structure established by the governance commission, you have county settings. Those settings, people come and make decisions on what to do with their county development funds. Those funds are directed to projects that are agreed. All those structures were pulled out of the governance process, empowered to few people who now make those decisions to implement those things. As each of those counties officials, whenever since President Weah became president, they have received county development fund. Since President Weah became president, when have they had county sitting for the people in the county to decide on the use of their resources? That was a form of decentralization. Since the beginning, president checked the record, they have not received county development fund. But junior officials of government in those counties, like city mayors, are receiving huge sum of money and implementing projects in the name of government. So governance is at its all-time low. The president has outsourced his responsibility to lead as president and takes pleasure only in the morale and benefits of the presidency, but doesn't want to take the responsibility and job of the president.
Thank you. Mr. Gibbon.
Yeah.
One of the things that when I met 2003, I was the guest of Jack Klein in Liberia and Ambassador Blaney. I was fortunate to have had a meeting with my former professor, Dr. G. Franklin Holt, when he was president of AMEU. And he convened a meeting between Mr. Brunskin and myself. He wanted me to support Brunskin because he knew I was a supporter of Backup Matthews. And my question to Honorable Brunskin was, what are you going to do about the abolishing of the unitary system in Liberia? I know for a fact that the unitary system in Liberia has hindered the development of the country. He agreed with me, but he said he would not further that course until he became president. So that tells me that the all-incumbent presidency, the imperial presidency in Monrovia is loved by everybody who is in power and hated by anybody who is outside of power. I'm saying this to say I have to agree to some degree that if you look at the budget and you look at the county of Grand Bassa County or all the counties, they are appropriated $200,000 each. A county the size of Lofa, $200,000. That's what is appropriated for each of the counties. Now, I was part of the last county city in Grand Bassa County because we are building a health center in DeSoto Town, and we wanted $200,000. We needed a 30% contribution from the county city, the County Social Development Fund. And we did go to the city, and it was a 2-day event. And finally, they voted to appropriate $30,000 towards our project. So I cannot speak for Lofa and other counties, but I can speak for Grand Bassa County, that our social development fund is being structured through the system because my organization appealed before then. We wrote a proposal and they debated it, and they didn't give us all what we wanted, but it did give us $30,000 that will be spent through the structure that is in place there. So I know that particular process works. Like I said, if I were to make my own decision based on what I have experienced personally as a manager and what it put me through, because I was CEO of the United Way and that's how we appropriated funds, I would say the structure in Bassa is working. Like I was telling Mr. Mami, I'm not in Lofa, so I don't know how to do it, but I know in Bassa it worked, where they appropriated $30,000 towards my project from the County Development Fund. Now, my friend talked about the president is not prosecuting. My friend, you were talking about separation of power here.
Mr. Gilman, if I may interrupt, if yes, you can tell us how we are doing when it comes to leadership, integrity, institution, and then security, then you can respond to the.
Yes.
Okay. As far as security is concerned, let's go to security. On security, I would give this president an A for the fact that when I was there 2003, I was surrounded by 15,000 UN hardcore helicopter tanks, and they were guarding our country. Even I was afraid of my own security because of the arms that were in the country. When the United Nations left, President Weah came in with his own security. That means our Liberian people, again, I have to give the credit to the Liberian people. Without the buttressness of the 15,000, Liberians have kept the country safe under this administration. So I have to travel. I went to the villages. I went to Nimba. I went to Cottington. I came back at night, no problem. So I want to give them an A in keeping the country safe. For me, that is germane to anything else that we will do. If Mr. Jai can go to Liberia and go to Bokangwe or wherever he's come from, if Mame can go to Liberia and go to where he's come from, whether it is Lofa or Bomi or Bopolu, that's great for us. I took friends with me, and we had a great time in Bomi. We went to Rubber Sports. We had no issues. So security is okay. Somebody want to talk about unresolved mystery. I was just looking at the numbers here. The United States, after today, we got 260,000 unresolved deaths. In Miami alone, we have 665 in this going year. Are we blaming Joe Biden for 260,000 unresolved murder? No. When you live in a metropolitan area like Monrovia, where you have over 1 million people, these are crimes that happen. And not because Jerome Gilman got killed, so they take my case and spring frogging in front of everybody. If I'm number 25, I have to wait my turn to be there. So we shouldn't say nothing is being done. When they are being persecuted, when they are being investigated, they have to investigate that. So for security, I give them an A. The country is secure. When there's security, we have economic development. We have family life. Go to Monrovia, go to Basso, places that I have been. And you see that the country is secure. We have not been hearing anything about ambushing people going to Basso or going to Lofa or going to, you were talking about crime in the metropolitan area. So that for me, the country is very secure.
Thank you. Alice, back
Mr.
to you.
Goodman,
Yes.
how can you be boasting of country being secure, especially the A, when the president himself came up and told the citizens to install cameras?
Oh, that's very simple. The president was saying, listen, somebody, I have a new home here in Florida. When it was built, I ordered camera everywhere. We have camera everywhere. That is the responsibility of the citizen. No matter what, we have one of the, I would say one of the most robust police forces in Florida. But we got what? 21 million people. The city of Miami, metropolitan Miami, had 3.5 million people. They got 12,000 police. But
Joe Biden is not making that announcement to citizens. That's what you need to understand.
Listen,
how are you comparing that to Liberia? How are you comparing Florida to Liberia?
I'm telling you that it is the responsibility of the state, it is the responsibility of the citizens themselves to also help the government secure the city, to secure themselves, to secure their home. It doesn't mean that we are not going to provide police or the army or the security of the state. It's not going to be there. It makes sense that, listen, in addition to what we're doing here as police officers and officers of the state, it would behoove you, if you can afford to get some security, so you can help police. Because in my home, in my business here, there was an accident down the road. They came to my door, knocked on the door. The police officer came. They brought their stick and recorded everything on my video camera to help solve that issue. That's what we do to help the state. It doesn't mean the country is wild and it's a wild, wild west. No, if you can afford to put a camera to your home.
First of all,
okay, we give you the chance to disagree or agree with him.
It is so disingenuous to sit here and hear Mr. Gilman say those things and to compare Liberia or even Monrovia to Florida, considering that even the fact that you're here in America, you can afford those things do you think the common Liberian in Liberia or in Monrovia or in the rural area will be able to afford the CCTV cameras? Are you comparing? Are you also comparing the you're talking about all unsolved mysteries, 200,000, whatever? Even one unsolved mystery, we can't even get it solved completely in Liberia. And you want to compare the unsolved mysteries and deaths in Liberia and look at it and say Liberia is safe and therefore security is at an A level in Liberia? Are you serious?
Ms. G Talk, when was the last time when you were in Liberia?
2017.
Okay, I was there last year, and I'm going in January. I go twice.
But we still monitor, but we monitor the country every year.
We're talking about personal experience. I'm telling you, I was there last, and I'm going again in January. I go sometimes twice a year. You were there 5 years ago.
But my being in Liberia does not mean that the news we hear, we don't hear news from Liberia. Does not mean we're not monitoring what's going on in Liberia. For you to come on this platform and compare Liberia to Florida, it's so disingenuous and it's so wrong.
It's not disingenuous.
So
I'm giving you
thank you.
Statistics of metropolitan life.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mamba, you want
This is not the first time. This is not the first time Liberia is being compared to Florida as you talk. So
can I?
Mamba, want to come in?
I want to come.
Your voice is breaking, Mova.
Oh Lord, can you now?
You're breaking up.
Police can't even take pay. Talking about
Okay, so all right, Mama, you want to say something? We're moving on to the next topic.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, better. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I was just in Monrovia in November, and to suggest, by the way, that because Mr. Gamer can afford to buy CCTV because he lives in America where he can earn money and be able to take care of his family, that means people in Liberia should buy CCTV. Does he have an idea of how much the low-income earners are making in Liberia? Is he aware that people that are working for the CDC are taking home $45 monthly, $45 United States dollars monthly? How can those people feed their families and be able to afford CCTV? I want Mr. Gaiman to walk, for example, on Broad Street. Just hold his phone in his hand. Don't do anything. Just walk on Broad Street. Why the police that he talked about, he said the police currently is one of the best in the world or in Africa, whatever, or it can be compared to the police in Florida. Let Mr. Gaiman go on Broad Street, walk on Broad Street with his phone in his hand. Just do nothing at night. Walk on Broad Street with a phone in your hand. See what will happen to you. Then you will not come on this platform and try to insult the suffering of our people. It is actually disrespectful to refer to Liberia in the manner and form in which you are, when you know very well that people back home are living in insecurity. People are being killed mysteriously. And you want to say because people die in America mysteriously, so they should kill people in Liberia mysteriously? I mean, what kind of comparison is this? But this speaks to the fact that the CDC clearly is not working to change the condition of the country. They are looking for all the negatives around the world to give support to the negatives they are perpetrating in Liberia. So you talk about insecurity, he looks for all the instances of insecurity in other places and then bring it to compare it. But that's not development. Let's talk about the roads in Florida. Do we have those kinds of roads in Monrovia, Mr. Gaiman? Tell us things like that. Then we talk about governance.
Thank you very much, and that's a great question. For somebody who comes from the ANC, when you talk about competence and incompetence, I think Mr. Cummings takes the cake. Mr. Cummings, who just couldn't even run a single party, that squandered. In fact, he just lost $70,000 US that he could not. Excuse me, I'm talking.
Answer my question. I didn't answer my comments. We asked him
Mr. Cummings, you see, you guys, you when you ask a question,
we are discussing
I'm laying this.
Go ahead, but we're talking about the government.
The ANC mantra is, it says past performance is a clear indication of future performance. You can't do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Yet and still, Mr. Cummings came on as a clean man with a clean hand. This is his stuff, clean hand. But when he came on later on, when he announced Team Cummings, he went all the way back to the 1980s and brought some of the worst killers, people who put us right where we are. And the president was right when he said everything that got damaged or spoiled in this country, they did it. He was referring to Dewey McIntosh, who, when you talk about passport, a man who a movie was made when he was foreign minister that sold our entire passport, and a movie was made about David McIntosh stealing and selling passport. You talk about McGill and the other folks. When you're talking about incompetence, now you want to talk about roads. The president have made roads his number one priority. In the U.S., I mean, you saw the European Union ambassador said, the president now should be called the by-road medicine because of what he wants to do. We will support his road projects. And today, when the president told you when he went to Qatar, the road now leading to Lofa County, a commitment has been made. So these are things we are talking. When you talk about roads, when you are talking about comparison, you got to compare because we're talking about a city of 1.5 million people. So if you were downtown Washington, D.C. or Newark, New Jersey, you dare not have your phone or your belongings in the open while you walk down Washington, D.C. or Newark, New Jersey or Trenton, New Jersey at night. You know that too. So I don't know why you're trying to force them compare the two. Yes, ma'am.
I work in D.C. I work in Southeast. Let me just say this. I work in D.C. I work in Southeast. I get off the train sometime, the bus, and I walk with my phone in my hand.
You walk with your
phone. You
see, let me just chime in on the security issue before we can go to other things. Everywhere in the world there are instances of crime.
Thank you.
Everywhere in the world there are instances of crime. I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. I went to school in Washington, D.C. I went to American University. I went to Georgetown. So what I'm saying is, I mean, right in Washington, D.C., right around Georgetown, you can find instances of crime. So it doesn't matter where you live and where you work. It doesn't matter the crime. What is important to note is there's no way you can give the government of Liberia aid for security. Even the police, under stress, limited resources, limited morale. I don't know the last time they were ever supplied with uniforms since 2017. I mean, just uniform to wear. See the police on the street, dilapidated. These are people who commit their life to serve their country. They can wear a fitting uniform to stay in the street, dignified and respectful way to serve their people. Look at the armed forces. You listen to the recording from the general when he was begging soldiers that we have sent outside the country in Mali or so, begging them to be calm, complaining about the arrears of over 4 months they've not taken paid and asking them to be calm. That the statement the Minister of Finance made on the radio was a reckless statement. That was the defense. So our security is a powerful security. On top of it dry, on it wet. You don't describe that form of security as an aid for a country. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yes.
The security apparatus, they don't have resources to move about. But we can give up to $700,000 up to $1 million to the first lady. For over almost 6 years now, no audit, who gave her money, what she does with it, no report. She only reports to the president when they are home, probably relaxing.
Thank you,
Mami. You don't do that with security. The security is overstressed, no resources to do their job. They cannot take pay on time. They don't have uniforms to wear, but we're spending money on other issues.
Thank you very much. That leads us to the next discussion point, development. Under development, we have infrastructure, which include roads, bridges, and buildings. We have health and sanitation, energy, telecommunication, or technology. So we're going to start with Mr. Gaiman.
Well, obviously, when you look at, my county here, and I like to do the comparison. My little county here has 350,000 folks. Our budget this year is $1.2 billion. That's for 350,000 folks in a small county. When you look at the Republic of Liberia, the total budget is about $550 million. Out of the $550 million, they say about between 70 and 80% go to recurring expenditure. That leaves 20% of the total budget, which is absolutely nothing. So one of the things that we need to do, I know we've been talking about, we have relegated ourselves to begging, to asking for foreign aid. At the rate we are going, we have no choice. With 20% of $550 million is absolutely nothing. So yes, when it comes to infrastructure, we are talking about roads, we talk about bridges, we are talking about hospitals, we are talking about schools, we are talking about those things that are germane to a democracy and the people. We've seen hospitals being built around the country. They just dedicated one yesterday. We saw one in Riverside. We've seen one being built in in Magibi. We've seen one being built in Grand Bassa County in Riverside. These are help that we ask and beg from around the country, around the world. So we are seeing a lot of development, which are not directly, and Mr. Mammy will tell you this too, that this money, the hundreds of millions, for instance, is now $1.3 million to build 1 kilometer road. Okay? If you are building a 100 kilometer road, you're talking about minimum $100 million, $110 million. Definitely it's not going to come from the $500 million budget we have. So this has relegated our government to actually being a beggar government abroad. In addition, we rely on the World Bank and other loan institutions to help us develop our roads and basic infrastructure, giving us a domestic and international debt. So these are things that we, as a whole, should look into and say, how do we raise our domestic revenue to actually get from under the weight of the international debt and the burden of begging? Nobody has been able to do that yet, other than we have to raise revenue. Yes, if you have to raise the revenue has to come from somewhere. Every one of us on this platform has a piece of property, either a home or a lot or land or farm in Liberia that are not even registered. We don't pay taxes. But yet and still, we want everything from the government. We need roads, we need hospitals, we need all of those things. How do we get these things? We, as Liberians, have to be honest with ourselves and say we have to raise our domestic revenue. Even I, that have a couple of properties in Liberia, recently before I turned them in to pay taxes on them. And there are families and there are properties in Liberia that have been there for hundreds of years, and taxes are not being paid. So
you sounded like Tubman now.
Yes, infrastructure development is something that we need. The president is doing an excellent job doing it, but it is actually heavily leaning on the international level. We talk about the roads and the bridges, like the hospital that was just dedicated, $30 million in Bapulu, all came from the UAE. So these are things that we are talking about. Could we have paid $30 million bill a new hospital? No. So for us to do that, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to do an introspection. We have to be honest. We have those of us in the diaspora have to pay our taxes to raise our tax base.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mame, you want to come in?
So I see the whole infrastructure debate from the viewpoint of the government basically using it as a conduit to extract money from donor,
Yes,
and divert it to personal use, extract money from the budget and divert it from personal use, and divert it to personal use in the name of building infrastructure. And that is because they know Liberians are craving for infrastructure. Liberians are craving for roads. Liberians are craving for market buildings. They are craving for hospitals and other facilities. They need electricity. So the desperation, the genuine desperation of the people for these basic social infrastructure put the government in a good position to use social infrastructure as a conduit to extract money from the budget and international partner and divert it to personal use and build substandard infrastructure or infrastructure whose values they inflate. And I want to be specific on this. That's the reason why I pull out some numbers to share with you. For example, the RRA Road Project, more than 5 international organizations,
Yes.
development organizations, presented proposals on how they could do the road on a public-private partnership. That government will not have to spend a dime, that they will spend, run the road, and generate money on their own. The average cost per all the organizations, some of them costed, for example, Broad Vision from Korea costed the road at $81 million. Sino Hydro Corporation costed the road at $94 million. Michigan Global Investment costed the road at $100. When you average that, is around $95 million to build the RR road to international standard. The government declined, but decided to hire East International not to pay $100 million, which is the highest amount ever costed for the road, but to enter a concession for $116 million, 16 million excess of the highest amount ever costed for the construction of the RIA road. Because somebody sitting somewhere wants to use the RIA road as a conduit to get $16 million out of the government. When there are international organizations, Michigan Global Investment, saying, I can construct this road, you don't have to pay me, let's enter into a public-private partnership, and I will extract my money over a period of time. Government refused, but contracted a company that the Ministry of Public Works have now conceded in the national legislature, that the company does not have the financial capability and the technical capability to construct the road. That's embarrassment. But more than that, Popo Beach, the government announced that they were building 50 units in Popo Beach at 800,000. That was approximately 16,000 per unit. 2-bedroom house in Popo Beach, in the center of the city, 16,000 for 2-bedroom. But that is not what is disturbing. What is disturbing is, at the time they were now dedicating the house, they added additional 34 units, 33 units that took the unit to 88 units instead of 50 units. But the price for constructing 83 units rose from 800,000 to 3 million. Technically saying, you are spending $34,000 to build 2-bedroom apartment in Popo Beach. For heaven's sake, all of us here have either built house before, building one now, or building two. We know what $34,000 can do to construct a unit. The government told us they spent $34,000 to build 2-bedroom unit in Popo Beach. So I see the entire road infrastructure. You go to the market in Douala, the Douala market. It's costing, the government announced that they spent $4.3 million. The hiring of the contractor to the road to build the market, no competitive bidding process, single source, somebody just selected somebody and hired them to go and build a market costing $4.3 million. So all the infrastructure projects going on across the country that are not really directed at growth corridors to be able to get any genuine social returns are only used as a conduit to extract money from the system or extract money from donors. They inflate the costs unreasonably because the people are desperate for this infrastructure. Nobody is actually querying and asking the hard question, how in the world can you build a 2-bedroom unit in Popo Beach for $34,000 United States dollars? It's on the government website, the executive mansion website.
Thank you.
That is the motive driving these infrastructure projects, because it's an easier way to extract money from the system and from international partners.
Thank you very much, Mommy. Mamba, can you come in?
Okay. Thank you. So, I mean, the other panelists, particularly the most recent speaker, said a lot. But let me give you a clear instance to prove that the government is that serious with infrastructure development, that Mr. Weah's perceived or proclaimed commitment to developing the rural infrastructure in Liberia is a mere mockery of the suffering of our people. Lofa County. Lofa County, as we all know, is considered the breadbasket of Liberia. On December 17, 2017, President George Weah and Madam Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, at the time she was president, broke grounds for the construction of the Banga to Salaye Road in Lofa County that would have cost the government $40 million. The project began in January 2018. 5 years down the line, that road has not been completed, even though our international partners brought forth the commitment they made to develop the road. The government of Liberia to date has failed or refused to fulfill her commitment to build such a road. Now, if there's any towering example to prove that this government is not serious with infrastructure development, that is the towering instance. The point is, if you develop the road to Lofa County, you open the way for agricultural produce to come from Lofa to Monrovia. A lot of goods are produced in farms in Lofa County. They do not reach Monrovia, or which has the largest market in Liberia, to feed some of our people. Most of our people in Lofa County normally make their farm, from their pockets, and then they do not take their goods to the market. At the end of the day, you create a cycle of poverty, you create a cycle of suffering, you create a cycle of dejected citizenry. That is what Mr. Weah is doing. Stand behind and pronounce that, yes, we will develop the infrastructure of the country, while it is solely and purposefully intended to line their pockets. So Ambolai talk about the RIA rule. The only piece he did not add is that Nathaniel McGill, according to the US government, gave the contract for the construction of the RIA rule to his own company. He established a company, get a contract to a company, and he had a huge share in the company. So take, for example, the $16 million, we know where it went. That's why Mr. Weah would not bring Nathaniel McGill to book, because he was either involved directly or indirectly benefited from the share of the funds for the construction of the RIA role. So the RIA role is a very important role. If you develop that role, you also, provide a means for our people to benefit economically. So this government performed very poorly when it comes to infrastructure development. Another instance of this government's catastrophic failure when it comes to infrastructure development is the Samarkand Sports Complex. We all know George Weah is a former global soccer icon. He is a legend of the football. But George Weah, as president, sits there, and the Samarkand Sports Complex cannot be used by our national team to play games. We are losing thousands and thousands of dollars using fields in our neighboring countries. And you want to talk about infrastructure development? If you cannot pave our roads, at least George Weah should be, developing the football field to help our people. Today, the government is losing thousands of dollars, even in Liberia, because people who normally pay to use the SKD cannot pay to use the SKD. Because you know what? People are lining their pockets when they're acting or want to be perceived as paving good roads. Let me give you another example of how bad our infrastructure is under Mr. Weah. George Weah pronounces that he's by road medicine. But take this, Mr. Jah, the Johnsonville Road, constructed by this government. The road, you go there today, that road is less than 2 years. But there are potholes on the road already. Because you know what happened? They inflated the price of the road. They spent under the amount that was initially budgeted for the road. They lined their pockets with the rest of the money, and they bought a very substandard road in Johnsonville. So instead of helping the people, they stole from the people, put the lives of our people at risk, and then the next government that comes back after 2 years, they have to be thinking about paving the Johnsonville Road. So look, George Weah is creating a circle of poverty, a circle of suffering, a circle that is only intended to enslave our people. Look, before I close on this, let's look at the most recent hospital they constructed in Bapolu County. Mr. Jar, the road to Bapolu County is impassable during the rainy season. You can't go to Bapolu. So how are you going to take patients from other parts of Bapolu to the hospital? How are you going to take patients from Bombing County, for example, to Bapolu? How are you going to take patients from Grand Cape County to Bapolu when the roads are impassable? Do you have helicopters all over the place to fly patients there? You don't have motorbike, in those counties to be able to take people to the hospital. So look, all the people the government is doing is to create a feeling that they are doing something when in essence they are doing nothing. All they're doing is to take on projects intended to line their pockets, enrich themselves, take care of Mr. Gayman and others that are living in the United States, while our people in Liberia suffer, go to bed hungry, they cannot find medical support, and there's no healthcare delivery. Look, it is very bad. Liberia is going down the drain, and this government gets an F. Gets it F.
Mr. John, when we come.
Thank you very much. Landy,
excuse me,
infrastructure,
no,
roads,
no,
bridges, and technology.
Excuse
Let
me.
it Obanto. Get it Obanto, please.
Now,
I think that
Excuse me, can I respond?
we're gonna give you a minute after she talks.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think Kesali summed it up, and Mame. I want to look at it from a different perspective. So we're saying, oh, and people are so excited they get carried away by beautiful buildings. It's like we see the buildings, but we don't even know the entire story. So Mr. Gayman talked about the hospital was $30 million, the one in Bapolu. The documents, the information from UAE said the hospital was going to cost 20 million. And they were sending people to build the hospital. It's like we do these infrastructures, we don't know the background, we don't know the story. So the hospital is dedicated, we don't know when it's going to be servicing people. My thing is, what is the need for building, for investing in all these new projects when you have buildings that you're not maintaining? You have JFK. I understand, yes, the hospital may be in an ideal place because you want people from rural area, in that location to be able to have a hospital that's going to service them. But what's happening to JFK? We built a dialysis center. Is it functional? Is it working? We say, okay, we now have an oxygen plant. What's happening there? Do we have oxygen there? What are the updates we're getting from those places? We're hearing about roads. Dry season, they will just do that. They will fix that. Let me go into Kolokwa. They will fix that mud nicely. And then by the time the rainy season comes, whatever quota they mess away, it finish. The road becomes potter again. You talking today, I watched on another show, they show pictures of the road in Bapolu or in Bombing County. They mix the little small quota they have with dust. And how are you going to maintain those things that you're doing? You're doing substandard work, and you're not able to maintain it. So why not invest in maintaining the buildings that you have, the things that you have that will give us some additional longevity instead of creating new things that are just going to just sit there. Look at RRA. I actually created this G Talk because of RRA Road. When you spend over millions of dollars, even the company that they awarded the project to, you can't even call Kobo in that building that they're in. Kobo. And the road is of such that it is dangerous. Several huge potholes. People have died on that road. And we're not saying anything. But it's okay for President Weah to travel on it, because if the president is traveling on the road, it means there's no traffic, so it's safe for him. If ordinary citizens are traveling, there's traffic back and forth. It's dangerous. What are we doing instead of wasting time getting contracts where we can benefit from extra money from it? Why are we not maintaining what we already have, building on those ones, improving them instead of investing in big buildings? So that's probably 2 years from now that we're not going to be able to use. And making and barrel medicine, barrel medicine is only for dry season. Because by the time the rain season comes, the headache for the medicine, the road comes again. So I think the government, I think their focus is different. I don't think they're focusing in the right direction. I think having all these buildings is being counterproductive, because there is nothing that the country is benefiting from these things, because we don't even hear we don't even hear about how these buildings are being maintained and what they are being used for. We just see the building. We see take for example the airport. People tell you the stench. They tell you the stench from the airport. There's no light. Even whatever the bus you travel on to go from the airport, whatever to the terminal, they're not even able to maintain that. We continue to see the government is doing well. They're building buildings where they're investing in this and investing in that. But why are we continuing to invest in new infrastructure development when the old ones we have, we cannot even maintain them to be able to help us tomorrow?
Thank you.
Mr. Gemmett, you want to come in?
Yeah. It is a time when I come on these shows and I want to debate. I really want to elevate the debate to a level that even our international partner will be impressed. But for my sister to say, or someone say it was $20 million and elevated to $30 million without producing an iota of documentation or citing one article.
There is an article, the initial contract was signed.
Excuse me, man. Excuse me, when you were talking.
When the initial contract was signed, when the initial contract was signed a year ago, over a year ago, we were told that the contract at the hospital will be built within 14 months. And it would cost $20 million.
I want you to cite a particular professional article or newspaper that can reference us to that particular.
I am going to send the article to John just now. I'm going to send it to him.
Then like you said, it's only G talk.
So can you cite where you're
let me reference. Excuse me. Let me reference JFK.
No, Gita, you want to find an article. You want to find an article and pass it over to Jab, but you want to get him talking. Yeah, you want to get him chance to complete.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it.
Send me the article that we can reference, that everybody can see. When you quote it like this, the Amula does, he will quote it, and you can go and it's falsifiable. That means nobody can fake it. Just
so can you post your own article for the 30 million? Can you tell us your source for the 30 million?
It's right here. Okay, if you read what the president, it's just there. Now let me talk about JFK. You talk about JFK. The vice president was on the show, on one of our sister shows last week, when she said most people don't know how JFK works. JFK is actually a separate and independent collaboration with the government. In addition, the hospital we are building, when we talk about decentralization, building a hospital in the far northwest of Wapulu, building one in Grand Gila, building one in Grand Bassa, building one in Riverside, building one using the Jackson Dole. This is what we call decent. When we're talking about JFK being overrun, if we were successful in maintaining Jackson F. Dole Hospital in Nimba, and we were successful in as we plan to do in Bapulu, in Grand Bassa, in Riverside, those are huge geographical areas that those people would not have to come from Bassa to JFK, from Riverside to JFK. So when you talk about decentralization, this is what it is. Okay, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf started this process with Jackson F. Dole Hospital in Nimba. The people are working on it. It is an excellent hospital. It has everything on it. So here we are. It is serving. The only problem that hospital has is the road to that particular spot, which they are fixing. If we cannot say all the road in the country should be completely fixed before we build these infrastructure. This is what we say government is continuity. when Ellen Johnson left, or we pick up from there, where Dr. Weir will leave, or somebody else will pick up from there. That's how you do development. In Grand Bassa County, the Fairground Road that was built in 1964 by President Tubman, that leads to our fairground, the seat of county government, since 1964 have not been paved. Under this administration, it was paved. Under this administration, Grand Bassa County Community College was elevated to a university. Recently, you saw that to decentralize the University of Liberia, Lofa Community College was now elevated to a university. So these are, when you're talking about infrastructure, people are saying, why build a hospital when you don't have nurses, you don't have doctors? But yet and still, the statistics say that we have graduated between 200 to 400 nurses in Liberia every year. We are saying nurses and doctors are going abroad for graduation. So why haven't we treated our folks to use to do? But in fact, you are saying hospitals should not be built until we get these hospitals. So, ladies and gentlemen, your infrastructure argument falls flat on the face. The president.
Thank you. Quickly, can you infrastructure? We also talk about internet connectivity and all that. But my question to you, let me start with Mr. Kessley. Is there anything working well in Liberia or in the areas that we've discussed that the government is doing well, or at least to an appreciable level?
Look, so let's take, for example, electricity in Liberia. And I hope Mr. Gamer is paying attention to that too. So is electricity working well for our people? The answer is absolutely no. Is there in fact safe drinking water in Liberia? The answer is absolutely no. Look, not much is working. If anything, the structures that this government met and inherited from the past government have been depleted and have been destroyed. Look at government buildings. When this government took over again, let me give you examples of why, in fact, the government is failing and spiraling downward. When this government took over, the SKD was good. It was being used by our national team. Today, we cannot use the SKD because it is destroyed. When this government took over, the RIA road, yes, it was not 4-lane, it was a 2-lane road, but it was working for our people. It was not a death trap. What the government did, they destroyed that road. Today, the RIA road is a death trap for our people. So you see, so there are chronological instances that proves that the government is actually going down the drain instead of taking our people out of poverty or improving their livelihood and their lives. That is unacceptable. So things are bad, things are getting worse. That is simple.
At this time, we want to open our phone lines. If you want to join the conversation quickly, we have like 20 minutes to close. 605-313-6004. The code is 791403#. Alex, back to you.
All right. So
Mama, you're talking, you are on mute.
Mama,
Yeah.
Are you still talking?
Yeah, since we're talking about infrastructure and we just, focus most of it on rural, I just wanted us to pay attention to, because part of the discussion we had was talking about electricity and talking about
telecom, internet.
Yeah, electricity and internet connectivity. Those are things we want to use to measure whether the government is performing or not. And like I said, we look at it in the prism or in the context of what the government promised and what is the current status as per available data, so that we don't go into 2023 election deciding on whether we vote for the president because opposition came together or not, or because the president saw Joe Biden and they took their feet, but rather based on what did the president promise and what did he deliver. For electricity, for example, a promise in the PAPD that will have increased electricity access by 30% by this time. 30% by this time. Instead, up to this time, they only added 4% of Liberian to the electricity grid. The promise to increase the generation of electricity from 126 megawatt in 2016, and by 2017, by 2023, we will have been having 270 megawatts. Instead, only because of the CLSG, we have 153 megawatts. So most of the promises the government made in terms of providing electricity, they failed. But one thing is important to know on the electricity is, besides just providing electricity, is because the president and the leadership abandoned everything they designed in their proper agenda to address electricity problem. The proper agenda that knows, and I'm saying this because I contributed to the agenda that led to the proper agenda. The proper agenda that knows that the McCoffey Hydro was producing below its capacity during dry season, and they would have invested in reservoir in the first year of the administration to address that problem. Instead of investing in reservoir, what happened was the president started to use budgetary resources to plant solar lights around the country, sub-standard solar lights, instead of diverting the money into what they have identified as a solution to the problem. More than that, they enter into an arrangement with a Turkish company to bring power. The international actors, the international community, and people involved with the energy sector had to get involved to abort that. The government in 2018 announced that they paid a debt to the LEC. The government of Liberia had owed LEC, to pay LEC $8 million in 2018 to be able to address the electricity problem. Like I said, most of these investments are only intended to extract money from the system. After they pay LEC $8 million in 2018, by December 2018, the government declared electricity as a national emergency and authorized LEC to enter into procurement agreement without competitive bidding process to distribute power across the country. After paying $8 million in less than 1 year, LEC announced that she could not pay her employees because she was cash strapped. The question now is, how can you receive an inflow of $8 million and in less than 1 year, you cannot pay your employees? So broadly, the promise to increase electricity access by 30%, you only increase it by 4%. The areas you identify that you have invested into to increase electricity access and distribution, you abandon those areas and started to invest in areas that had nothing to do with addressing the problem, but only because they were creating shortcuts for you to receive additional money to line your pockets. We can talk about telecommunication. Today in Liberia, there is no 3-day free call. Before this government, the cost of telecommunication has doubled since George Weah took over. So every action taken by the government, and all these things are not because of war in Ukraine, doubling the price of telecommunication, invading the process to address electricity. It was not because of war in Ukraine. It was because of choices government made to increase taxes on the people.
Thank you, my man.
Schools, for example, let me lay on this one. The government promised to build schools across the country. Today, check. George Weah has built more private homes for himself than he has built schools for children sitting on the floor.
Thank you. At this time, because we got 2-minute callers here, so I want to take them 1 minute each before I go back to you. I know Glenda want to show what she was talking about. She's sending them to me. Well, let me take a few calls here to get our viewers involved here. The first one here is Mr. Evans Morris. Mr. Morris, you are live. Quickly. And at the end of your 1 minute, please give the government a grade in democracy, in governance, and development. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jai, and greetings to your panelists tonight. I like this platform, and I think for the most part it's because it's objective and it's well balanced most of the time. And I think one of the things that I noticed on this platform throughout the past year, is that we've been kind of skewed against the president, our current president. And I myself, I have some, gripes against the president. But I think sometimes we need to highlight some of his achievements, especially at the end of the year. This would have been the best time to do it. One of the things that I noticed personally since I've been, getting into politics the last couple of years, for example, I have family members who live in Liberia. At the beginning of the presidency, a lot of people complain about the LEC. LEC was very inconsistent. Current was always going every 5 minutes. They called it a Christmas light. And I think Mr. Mohammed touched on it. Now they're giving credit to CSG for bringing, somewhat stable, a stable LEC in the country. So that's one of the things that the president has improved on. Whether you say it's because of the Ivory Coast thing, but they facilitated that, and now we have it in the country. And a lot of people tell me every day, "Oh, the current is good. The current is stable. We barely got, loose current." I know not everybody has LEC, but that's a big part of the president's, achievement for one. Another thing, I'll be quick. Usually I'm pretty quick, but just give me like a minute here. Another thing is when people talk about this whole, democracy, I think we're quick to forget. Under President Taylor, which I live under his regime in Liberia, under President Dole, those are dictatorship. We know that not many opposition, if any, won any election and was seated and and took their seat. They were intimidated tremendously. Now people like to point out to this Celia Euro situation, which was done by some thugs, not the government forces, not the police coming to your house at night and kidnapping the political leaders of any party. So I think under the government there has been a great, a great improvement in terms of democracy. So I'll just get to the point. Overall, in terms of governance, how the government is running the affairs of the country, I'll give them a C plus. Not very great, but not the worst we've seen. In terms of democracy, I'll give the government a B plus because I think the country is free when it comes to political parties. We see a lot of political activities going on with the ANC, the CPP, different political parties. We have to give that to them. And then in terms of the economy, I'll give them a D. The semi-toy needs to be replaced. We need more, great economists in that country to run the country. I'll just leave it at that. I think I've gone too far. I'll let other people
very far. Thank you. Let me welcome Mr. Ruben Morris. Ruben, this is your first time. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. Ruben, are you there?
But the past speaker, was he also a Morris?
Elvis. Okay, let's go to Robert Gagwa. Robert, go ahead. You're live.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate you for taking this call. Look, I think I need about 2 minutes, if you permit me. Look, I love the conversation. My name is Robert from Atlanta, and I love my Auntie G passionately speaking on the issues, and I love her. She does no wrong in my eye, but I have to disagree with her, and I also have to disagree with Moba. I think a lot of times in our country, when we talk about opposition, is this mindset that the opposition primary responsibility is to be negative 100%. That's not what it is. I think as we move and continue to drive our democracy, what Liberians will want to see the opposition do is, one, hold the government feet to the fire. Absolutely. But be balanced and objective. If the government does something good, don't be shy to point it out. That's what it is about. Because if the government succeeds, Liberia succeeds, and beyond that, your government, the power that you want, you will come to power and you will see a better structure to pick up from where George we are left. Look, I agree with the last quarter. He was very, very clear. Moba spoke about RIA role and the fact that RIA role is a death trap right now, given the fact that what's happening with the reconstruction of the role. Look, I get that the government has really dropped the ball on this one. I think that they should not have appointed East International. They dropped the ball. I think the Minister of Public Works spoke about that. But to just say that the RIA was working on the LA because there was no construction going on that's going on right now, it's bad. Look, we traveled this road many times. That road was a death trap, given the fact that that place was dark. Look, there were trucks parked on RIA road, 2 o'clock in the morning, no signs, no lights. Imagine driving from the airport to Monrovia. You could have ran into trucks at any time. And a matter of fact, people die on that road because of that. There are many systemic issues that we have in our country that have caused most of the areas, whether it's electricity and other areas, not to be functioning at the highest level. But to just say that, oh, well, it wasn't a death trap on the LA, now it's a death trap on the George Weah, that's not how you speak to the issue objectively, my friend. Okay? Now, with regards to this government, as far as I will agree with the last quarter. I agree with everything he said. I think Summer 20 needs to be replaced. The economy is bad. I think the government, democracy-wise, I think they've done pretty well in that area. We hope that they continue that into the next election. But there are some things that are working. Everything is not working 100%. We're not where we want to be at. But we have systemic issue. Until we fix those issues, we will continue to go down this road. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Let me bring in GS Camus. Go ahead quickly, Mr. Camus. Mr. Camus, are you there? Let me go to Michael Patmo while we wait for
Hello,
Mr. Camus.
can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead, Mr.
Can you hear
Camus.
me? Okay, Dennis. Again, thank you. And I'm not going to go too long with the conversation because Mohammed made most of my points. And I would just say, given that point, democracy actually is B. I would give the government B for that. The economy, I would give them B. Security, I would give them C minus. Overall, grade, I give them C. For the fact that security, that is so good, they just organize themselves and just go into the public and do whatever they want to do, kill one another, and citizens take justice in their hand and kill them. And police around there do nothing about it. Then we come to taxes. People talk about, Mr. Kenneth said, if you go pay a tax, how you just go to the government, you go pay tax, they don't tell you, they don't evaluate your property to say this is what you're supposed to pay. They don't lay the mechanism for going to pay a tax. You just go to the government because you want to pay tax. Government is supposed to lay the basic. If you get a house, they appraise your house, they give you a tax. Every year, to follow all the state in the DAS in America. When I tell you, people wanting to go pay their taxes and things. Then we come to infrastructure like, okay, we talk about roads and things, we didn't talk about the schools.
Yeah, just
Okay,
end with the
right
infrastructure
there,
so we can take more calls.
Yeah, so right there, I would tell you from, let's say from the president era, all the way to how they call it, hour 2, because that's the District 6 area there. I live there. There's no public school over there for even kindergarten. Everybody that got school over there is a private school. My dad, my guy is road by a house. The other place, there's another, I live 3 blocks away from him. Only where they live, the guy road there, and after that house, right behind it, then the road stopped. So, that's what I got to see. And then, I just thank you and thank Mohammed, because I like him, he come with numbers.
Thank you.
To look at his number.
Thank you.
Talk number.
Thank you.
So thank you, but guys, enjoy you and thank you to women over there. I will let you see the women.
Thank you. Let me go to Mr. Michael Patmo. Mr. Patmo, quickly after you will be Cyrus, and then we'll close the line. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you so much. Let me just quickly grade the government here. On infrastructure, I'll give the government a C. Security, I'll give them a C. Democracy, I'll give them a C. Healthcare, I'll give them a D. On the economy, I'll give them a D. Education, that will be D. Transparency will be D. Water, I'll give them a D. Electricity, I will hold off on that yet because that one is still in process. As for corruption, I will give them an F, complete F. And that would average up to a D. This government has much more to do, and I don't think they don't even have enough time to do that, and we really need a change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me get our last caller here, and that's Cyrus McGee. Cyrus, you're live. Okay.
Mr. John.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing?
Good.
I'd like to say good evening to you and your panelists. Great job, indeed. I enjoy the show, indeed. But if I would give it out to any of the panelists who've been much more objective this evening, I'll give it out to Amula Mahmed. He's been on point with his arguments. He comes with the facts. He wants to direct you to where to get those facts and all of that. So I'll give it out to Mahmed. Mr. Jonathan, Liberia. We cannot write Liberia all totally. Like I hear my brother Kesari said nothing is working, but he just told us he's from Liberia in November. But yet still nothing is working. You can fly in and out of the country, come back safe. I was there twice this year almost. I know what it is. I could drive around Monrovia at 2 a.m. without any problem. And we know what it is. Infrastructure, there's a lot that needs to be done. We know about sprinkler projects here and there, but like somebody put it, those are projects that are needed by the people, but government just want to do them to get reelected. I heard somebody talking about the issue of Babu Hospital. That's a very, very good project for that region. You will not want roads into every region before you get healthcare delivery. Those people could travel in the mud, in the dust to Monrovia. Some of them die on the way. I mean, they do have relief. Yes, there is a need for a paved road into that area. And there's a need for a lot of projects to be done. When it comes to governance, I want to put it at the feet of both the legislature and the executive. Whenever I hear about the RIA road, it beats my heart so terribly. Because this was a project that even from the executive went to our 103 lawmakers on Capitol Hills. They passed this as a law. RIA is not just something that the government just speaks about and say, let's do it. It was before the legislature. Those people on Capitol Hill sat there, knew that this company was incapacitated to do this job. They went ahead, whether it was brown envelopes, whether it was whatever that went wrong, that approving that we have what we have. So we believe that we share square on the executive for implementing a wrong project and the legislature for approving what we have today. But this, I will give the government C plus and much more needs to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me get the last caller because he dropped off earlier. Ruben Harris, go ahead. You're live, sir. Oh, he dropped off again. All right. All right. Thank you, callers. I just want to mention here that currently we are carrying on our fundraiser. There's a fund drive to expand our operations throughout Liberia. We are only raising as little as $10,000. If you can, please donate. Other donations are coming in. I'm not going to announce their names tonight until I get approval from them to say, go ahead and announce the names. But we are very grateful to those that are donating. Our Cash App and Zelle numbers, they are right there. The Zelle number and the Cash App is 651-392-6224. So please donate and let us expand and educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia, even throughout the length and breadth of the country. I also want to mention here that tomorrow at 7, we're going to have our History Channel. The Liberia History Channel will be discussing President Joseph James Cheeseman. And on Sunday, Hello Pastor will be here with Reverend Chandler Freeman, and we're going to be discussing the question of heaven and hell. Well, those are all the calls we have today, and we will be wrapping this up. So I want you to take a minute each, and let's wrap up a response to our callers. And the big question we asked from the beginning, at the beginning of this program is Liberia headed in the right direction? I want you to use 1 minute, respond to the callers, and answer this question: if Liberia is headed in the right direction or not, looking at those 3 areas that we look at: democracy, development, and governance. Let me start with Mr. Mame. You're muted, Mr. Mame.
Actually, that headed in the right direction. The country, in most cases, reversing, in some cases, stagnated. to one place and turning around. And most of the efforts directed to addressing economic issues in the country, when I look at the numbers for the Ministry of Finance, I realized that we've been managed to reduce inflation significantly. We've been able to increase some macroeconomic issues and ensure some macroeconomic stability. The fundamental question now that we've not been able to answer is, how do these macroeconomic stability, how can we use the macroeconomic stability to be able to invest in our people? Most of the investment we're making as a country is not directed to the people. Those investments are directed into projects intended to divert money to government officials' pocket. For example, the government announced that she spent 30 million to build 88 units in Popo Beach. That is around $38,000 per two-bedroom unit. That's the worst form of stealing you can do to Liberians. The RIA Road Project is another classic example of how they divert resources. Institutions, internationally acclaimed and recognized businesses, promised to build the RIA for under $100 million under a public-private partnership. Documents presented officially to government. The government declined, but decided to hire a substandard company and awarded them a concession for $116 million. Those are not things we can celebrate. When it comes to democracy, like I said, the tenets of democracy include both the governed and those who are governing. The people on the side who are the governed have taken strategic direction. They are committed to changing their leaders through the ballot box. The government itself has options, like I said, most of the time, to be dictatorial, but they have succumbed to the will of the people. So we applaud them on that for succumbing to the will of the people. Even though there are attempts, like I said before, when the finance minister tried to convince Liberians publicly in the county-wide campaign that the best option for the country is to have a benevolent dictator who has ultimate power to make ultimate decisions to move development faster. Those were attempts to undermine democracy, but the people stood up. The legislature, like I said, is a caravan of thieves in most instances. They make decisions based on how much they can receive. They don't make decisions on any informed opinion. This thing about the RIA rule, experts advised the legislature that it was wrong to give a concession to RIA for two reasons. One, that there are institutions wanting to build this road free of charge. Why don't you do that? But even if you feel that you got so much money and you want to spend, don't spend it on a company that does not have the financial and technical capability to do it. The legislature refused because somebody in the executive mansion wanted it that way. Today, the Minister of Public Works has said publicly that the company hired to do the role doesn't have the capacity, both technical and financial, to do it. So the country is now moving forward significantly. We're making some gains by and side the rule, but those gains are not being translated into improving the welfare and living standard of the people. Promises the government made, they've not been able to fulfill the promises. They've abandoned and put aside their development agenda, and most of the time taking decisions on impulsive reasoning. The government have not been able to build schools as they promised. The president has built more private homes than he has built schools for the country. He built playgrounds when kids are sitting on the floor. The promise to increase teacher to student ratio to at least 50 students per one teacher. What has happened in fact now is teachers are leaving the classroom because of what they call harmonization. They have reduced their salary and reduced their morale. So instead of having 50 students per classroom that they promised, classes are overcrowded. Liberians today, access to telecommunication. The cost of voice and data has tripled. There is no longer 3D in Liberia. It's not because of war in Ukraine. It's because of a choice the government made to increase taxes. You increase taxes, we cannot see it reflected in the revenue. The budget cannot increase significantly. United Party took the budget from under 100 million to from under 50 million to 500 million. And today, you increase taxes on the people in almost every facet of the country. You cannot increase the budget to $1 billion. There are leakages going on for which we cannot account and for which the budget cannot move from where it is. Investment in the people is mostly investment in few individuals. The country is now moving forward. We want to use this medium now as we move into 2023 to see how we can call onto Liberians to see one thing, that we love George Weah. He's our icon. He has done best for the country. He has done best for himself, for the country in terms of soccer. There is nothing he can do any more than what he has done for the last 6 years. He doesn't have the capacity to address our problem. He doesn't have the ability to set and provide leadership. We should give the presidency to somebody who is able to diagnose these problems, put people to solving them and holding them accountable. The president cannot hold anybody accountable because he doesn't have a sense of what they are doing. He's completely off. He has outsourced his responsibility as president. And if you love him so much, you cannot love him to the extent where you hate yourself and suffer your country. George Weah has done everything. He has served as president. He's gone to being the world best. This is the time for Liberians to love themselves. Do not vote for George Weah, not because you hate him, but because you love your country and because you love yourself. He doesn't have the capacity to lead. He doesn't have the mindset to lead. He doesn't have the courage to prosecute corrupt officials because he himself is participating in corruption. So he doesn't have that courage to do it. Don't let George Weah until you hate yourself and suffer yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gaiman.
At first, I was kind of elevating Mr. Mame, and he began to argue, elevate the argument, but then he gravitated towards the tirade of a partisan. Mr. Mame worked for the alien government that Mr. Molu himself said was one of the most corrupted, even Charles Taylor. Even that the man that he represents now, Mr. Gonglo served 3 positions in alien government, the most corrupt government according to Molu. He was Solicitor General, then he was Minister of Labor. With all the great ideas that Mame is talking about, the government that in which he served, and which now his boss is serving, or served twice, became one of the most corrupt. In fact, the IRA role we are talking about, our contract was initially signed on the alien. Those are facts. But let me go to this here. What makes this administration one of the best ever?
The contract was never signed on an alien. Let's just put that correction up.
Excuse me. LACC, it was President Weah that gave them prosecutorial power. It was President Weah that gave freedom of speech on an alien. Rodney Shear was found guilty for libel and sentenced. Costa was jailed on an alien. We are talking about the Camara Act that was signed, the Freedom of Speech Act. It was President Weah. We talk about road construction from 1822 to 2018. We had a total of 1,100 kilometer road paved. On a Joe, we are now talking about 455 kilometer road paved. These are facts. We talk about the Bali Island. The road is being paved. You're talking about one of the things we have to talk about when you talk about taxes. Liberia does not have the property identification system that I have been talking about for years. Nobody can implement that. With all the property identification system, you cannot have taxes as you want them. Now, we're talking about monetary policy. Mr. Toure is the best finance minister that we have ever had. When people were comparing Ghana to Liberia, that Liberia, you need to mimic Ghana. Today, Ghana has admitted that her inflation rate is, as of yesterday, 53%, and the government is basically insolvent. They wrote the international community that they will be in default. This is a government, and here today, our finance minister, our inflation rate was at 30% when Mame and the Unity Party left government. Today is less than 10%. And you want to compare that government today? Samuel Toure is a genius. He's a genius. So when we're talking about giving and grading this government, I stick with the totality of C plus 75 because there's a lot of work that's left to be done. And when he's done, whoever comes in, we have to pick up where he stops. And we have to support whoever comes in and we build our country. We are not here to tear down what Ellen did. She did some great stuff. And Joe, we are picked up on it. Joe, we are doing some great stuff. And when my man or somebody else come in, they pick up on it and go, that's how we build. So ladies and gentlemen, I give this government 75%. It's a C plus.
Thank you. Let's hear from Minister Tue.
So yesterday when you hear me singing, oh, I'm talking, oh,
Mr. Kasali, so that is just to buttress, you say he's a genius, right? It's good to are thinking. Go ahead, Mr. Kasali.
Mr. Gavin has, but some of the comments made because
My man, come in campaign. Come in campaign. Come in campaign for time.
Your system is grinding your mobile.
You stealing Wi-Fi?
Mute yourself. Let's see again. Let's try.
Is it better now?
Yeah, 7% better. 7% better. That's correct.
Good. All right. So I was trying to say that our people need to wake up to a day where they see the opposition's participation in our governance structure as very key. Now, people are being critical that opposition leaders or opposition folks are negative. We are not negative. But according to democracy and the tenets of democracy, the fundamental responsibility of the opposition is to be critical or to ask questions. I'll give you very credible sources. So take, for example, if you look at the Legislative Assembly of the British Columbia, it defines the opposition role, the primary opposition role, as to questioning the government. So you go to another example, the Institute of for Government. It defines the opposition role as being critical of the executive. So as an opposition figure, we are not going to conform to minimalism. If you come here and you expect us to be minimalists and hail Mr. Weir for doing little or nothing, we are not going to conform to that. We are not going to conform to the idea that because the road was narrow when Mrs. Salif was president, Josh Weir comes as president, breaks down that narrow road, makes it a death trap. Months into the contract, the public works minister comes and announces that the company that was awarded the contract is technically incompetent, unreliable, and incapacitated to pave the road. And you want us to conform to such minimalism? We will not. We will remain critical. We cannot sit here and pretend that Samuel Tue, who was flown out of Liberia when he had accident in Lofa County, and the rest of the other folks had to seek medical care at the JFK, that means the government is doing well in terms of health care delivery system. I mean, that is unacceptable. We should be angry. If our president cannot go to JFK to seek medical attention, why should we say, okay, the government is doing well with medical care? So you're telling us that the lives of Mr. Weir, the First Lady, the Finance Minister, and others are better than the lives of ordinary Liberian people? That is unacceptable. And you expect us, because we're in the opposition, we should come and start hailing Mr. Weir and telling him thank you for doing that? We will not do it. I am not here to sugarcoat or make Mr. Weah feel good. Insofar as the government is looting, our people are suffering, our people are dying from curable and preventable diseases. Being critical of Mr. Weah, in fact, is something that you should consider less. We should do more than just being critical. We should not allow Mr. Weah to sit down. The Liberian people should consider the opposition community a failure if we give the government a tacit endorsement of the stealing, the mismanagement, and the miscarriage of our democracy that we are witnessing today. We should give Mr. Weah F. George Weah should not be given another day when we have the election and we have an inauguration in 2024. He should be removed as president because our country is experiencing a downward spiral. See the economy. Now, talk to any official of this government, including the government's representative on this show tonight. All they will compare their performance to are all the negatives. Right now, you ask him, you talk about roads. He will say the last government did not pave roads. So what he's telling us that this government is not paving roads. You talk about education, take for example. Mr. Ja, we all agree that over 90% of university and college graduates in Liberia do not know what it means to boot a computer. And you want us to give this government a tacit endorsement because it makes you feel good? We cannot do that. We should not live in America or sit in America where we see life and we understand how the government is so responsible for citizens and expect it to be less for our people back home. That is unacceptable. The lives of American citizens or people who live in America are no better than the lives of ordinary Liberian people. You know how many of our citizens are dying from toothache in Liberia because the JFK doesn't have professional medical doctors and just things such as paracetamol? And you want us to give this government a tacit endorsement? We cannot do that. Coin whatever name you want to coin for us. Describe us whatever way you want to describe us. But 10, 20 years from now, posterity will judge us right that we stood up against the decadence in our governance structure. The roads are being destroyed. Our schools are going down the drain. Teachers are unprofessional. They are untrained. People who do not even have requisite qualification are in our classrooms. See how many people who did not earn legal papers are teaching in our universities. And you want us to sit here and say Joshua is doing well? No, Joshua is not doing well. See how much we spent recently to keep Mr. Weah in Qatar to watch his son playing football. His son, who is not even a Liberian citizen. By the way, that is a classic example of the lack of patriotism exhibited by our president. Joshua is the only president in living memory who sits as head of a country and his son pledges allegiance to another country. That is unacceptable. That is something that should annoy every Liberian citizen. It should be Liberia first, Liberia last in everything we do. We should not say, oh, he do small. Hey, let's accept it. That is not acceptable. That is why Liberia is where we have been. Because when we were founded, people say, oh, because the American colonization society is establishing a government here, so they think they won't do it, let them do it. And that's how we kept going down until today we sit at this place. We need to repudiate and reject the things Joshua is doing. He is not doing well for our people. The day any of us here, we have families and friends back home, we are never satisfied when we go to bed, we worry for their lives because we do not know what will happen to them. It is unacceptable to try to sit here and blame us who are calling Mr. Weah for what he is and say we are not doing well. We did not ask Mr. Weah to run for the presidency. If he had the idea that he could not govern properly or he could not give we the Liberian people what we want, he shouldn't have run for the presidency. Insofar as he sits as president of Liberia and we feed him, we clothe him, we provide security for him, we will not give him any tacit endorsement. He needs to do better than what he's doing. And by the way, he has failed our people and will reject him. I gave him an F today. I will give him an F when we go to the election. I will give him F when we go to the election, and we will kick him out of the Liberian presidency. Thank you.
Thank you. Glennie?
Woo! So I am going to just sum it up. And my entire summary is going to be coming from what Mr. Gilman said. I will say this. Mr. Gilman mentioned that during the Ellen government, Rodney Sear and Henry Costa was jailed. I'll also add that during the Ellen government, they were freed. But during President Weah's administration, Henry Costa had to flee Liberia. Isaac Vatupa had to flee Liberia. Now we have Martin Colley living in exile. In short, I will say if we can have Mr. Gilman, who is a staunch seditian, come out here and give his government C. C for me is fair. And you can only get a shot, a good shot once. And if we've given you this shot and your grade is C, meaning fair, means it's time to hang it up. So thank you, Mr. Gilman, for promoting your government in such a light that they failed at the first time that they've been given this country to run. Thank you.
Mrs. Marva?
Well, first of all, I am so overwhelmed by all these discussions. I'm really, really, really enjoying every bit of it. For democracy in Liberia, I want to be saying that the people of Liberia are the main source of the democracy that is working in Liberia. If you talk to most people, or almost everybody tells you that they don't want any war. So no matter what is going on, they're going to endure that. That's the main thing that is keeping the country going. For freedom of speech, I would say, yeah, fair. You know, the government, I see a lot of people to attire centers, they say what they want to say, and because the government really, um, for the most part, they are not, running after most of the people that I see speak on camera in Liberia before hiding. Um, no check and balance. When we talk about the executive, in terms of the executive, the legislatures, and the other branch of government, the executive is so powerful. So imagine a president leaving the country before them, and he has to go before writing a letter and backdating the letter, and he came and nobody has anything to tell him. So that alone would tell you that the executive is overly powerful, and the rest of the branches of government are just like houseboys and housegirls. On development, the RIA role is something that is worrisome because I went to Liberia and I saw that the road was very, very dark, and the big trucks were parking in the street. People facing tires were all in the darkness using telephone lights. And I was really, really shocked that even the security, like police that are supposed to be arresting the people, were not even seen anywhere throughout the trip to my house. Never saw a police in that darkness. And so it's something concerning. The mid highway from Monrovia to the southeast, I saw some videos. They are still working on it, but it's been years. This road should have been done by this time. But people are busy focusing on Maserati and its surroundings, forgetting the main highway that connects Liberia. On healthcare, I'm talking about development. On healthcare, I see that government officials go abroad for treatment. People with resources, they go abroad for treatment. So that alone will tell you that the healthcare system is very, very poor. And sanitation is the worst because when you stand on Broad Street, you can smell feces everywhere, see it everywhere. And the trash, I mean, garbage is piled up every single corner. So sanitation is worse, and we are not surprised why malaria is always on the rise, typhoid, and all of these things, because the dirt is too much. So for democracy, I would give the government C. Development, I would say C minus. Then we talk about the strengthening of institutions, the institutions that's supposed to be strengthening everything else, like the LEC, GAC, and etc. Government, security. I mean, security is very, very poor. You know, as I said before, if the president can make an announcement that citizens supposed to have cameras to their homes to fight crime, especially in places like Liberia, that is concerning. If Joe Biden were today go on national TV and tell the Americans to be their own securities, there will be fear. People will start panicking. And so the government is supposed to assure the citizens that all is well, they're going to do their best. But in our country, there's no security. The security is very poor because you see citizens, because there's no faith in the security system, the citizens will take on the fight. You have jungle justice, where ordinary citizens probably that are being chased by criminals will also get in the trap of other citizens that take them to be criminals and beat them up, sometimes kill them. We have many instances of people being, killed because they are taken to be criminals when they are not really criminals.
Yeah.
Then you have what happened recently where two Zogos were killed by angry citizens. Now, if the police is working, you will not have citizens taking such action. But because they don't have faith in the security, so they take upon themselves to act in these instances. And so I'll say security need to be something that the government should be considering so that we avoid just jungle justice. The police need to be proactive. And so there are many, many other things the government need to work on. So in a nutshell, I will be giving the government C minus all over, looking at what's going on currently.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you. Gladys,
Dennis, I would not feel good if you do not share what I sent you to debunk what Mr. Gilman said. There's several newspaper articles out there that said the cost of the Babalu Hospital is 20 million and not 30 million. I found the articles, I took snapshots of them, and I sent them to you. Please share at least one. I've also tagged Mr. Gilman on my page so that he can see that the hospital cost that we've been told by the Minister of Health is 20 million and not 30 million. Thank you.
Right. I put that, I shared this before on the screen.
All right.
And I put the link in the comment section so that people can click on that link and view the newspaper article.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for spending the time the last Friday of the year with me right here on Focus on Liberia to debate the issues. I really appreciate your time. I want to also appreciate our viewers and even those who will watch later. Until then, we're going to conclude and end this broadcast with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Whether you believe the government got a C minus, D minus, A plus, F, or something below, we are all Liberians. And as we go into 2023, let us do our very best to make our country the glorious land of liberty. Have a good night. God bless you and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
We are Liberians.